Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Overseas Famous Podcast, Season 4, Episode 6. Here with Sean McCaw. Sean is an old friend of the pod. Oh shit, old friend of the pod. He's been on before with the book. We've collaborated on a ton of things and a lot of stuff that you guys don't even know that we're doing in the background. But Sean is a former overseas athlete and has done a lot of stuff with helping athletes, and I think that's what we're here today to talk about. We're here. It's not even really a podcast. It's more of a discussion, or not an interview. It's more of a discussion because the topic today is divorce, and I went through a divorce. Sean, talk to us. You've gone through two, and we're just trying to figure out why there's that stigma and why overseas athletes, especially overseas athletes. I mean, all athletes have trouble, but overseas, I think there's a different. It hits different with why relationships are so hard to maintain. So, Sean, let's get into it. So, you've been divorced twice.
Yes.
Okay, I'm on the first one. I'm only on one right now, so that I'm only on the one. But take us through.
Let's hope you stay at that one.
Let's hope I stay at that one. So you have, what do you think was the biggest issue? Like, what do you think our problems are that we're so hard to stay with? Is it us? Is it them? What is it?
It's a combination of things. I think my story was maybe a little bit different than a lot of the other overseas players. When they go back home, they usually get a divorce. They have their wife back home. And then once they retire and go through the day-to-day stuff, what they haven't experienced in a long time, that usually leads to problems. My situation was different because I was already living in Europe. I knew I wouldn't be moving back to the States, and my first wife was European. So there was I would say there was a lot of issues with us as far as cultural differences, things like that. But I think probably the main thing was my wife was a successful businesswoman when I met her, and she then gave up her job, her life, kind of, to follow me around when I started to move to different countries. And we had a child together. My firstborn is 24 now, and it was kind of like she lost her identity, I think, which caused some problems. Of course, every marriage has different things going on, but that was, I think, one big problem. And and a lot of cultural differences too.
The cultural stuff is wild because that's something people don't really often talk about. I know a friend who married a girl from Spain, and there's a lot of things, like you can see him changing a lot of the ways he was, because there is such a difference in how things go. Like, he's all about, and you're in Germany now, so you're permanently, living overseas.
Yeah. Right.
But he's up until like 3 a.m. They're eating dinner at 11 o'clock at night and stuff. So they're still doing the European thing, but they're living in America. So I'm like, it's just one of those things where the cultural stuff is big. And I look at that. I look at there's a lot of different factors, because when I look at it, you married, and that is one huge thing where there's another person and you look at like the Tom Brady thing, Tom Brady, Giselle. It's like they want to pursue their stuff, and they're still like, well, I'm kind of holding out until you're ready and done.
Right.
But them giving up their identity is really tough, and I think that's it's a hard field to navigate.
Yeah, I mean, women go through it tough when they're dating an athlete in general, because they totally lose their identity. They're no longer Sabrina. They're no longer that person anymore. They become Sean's wife, Justin's mother. They're no longer their own person anymore. They are plus one. And that's a difficult thing to maneuver. And I mean, looking back on it, I think we both went into it in a situation where at the time I was wild as hell. I was doing the most overseas. I had been over here for a couple of years when we met, and I was really wild. I was living my life, right?
Yeah.
And she was at the time was with someone, probably a very boring relationship, and I offered some change to that. We got together. I don't think either one of us really thought about really getting married until we actually did, kind of. Um, our son was born first, and that was planned because I looked at her as someone who was, she had her shit together, she had her own business stuff going. And I looked at her kind of like I needed something to calm my ass down,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
And we got together. It was pretty easy at first, pretty nonchalant. Everything was kind of chill. And we planned our son. She did not expect to get pregnant as fast as she did. I know that now. Um, but she did. And yeah, and that was a total wish kid. And yeah, and then we decided, okay, let's do the right thing and get married. And
Hmm.
I think that's not the greatest basis for everlasting marriage. I don't think it was we definitely loved each other, but I think she would also look back and say that it wasn't something where we went into it like crazy in love kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I get that. And I look at my situation. My situation was odd because we were together in college. It was a college relationship that then continued, and then I'm going to the G League, and she was a coach. She was coaching at Monmouth, so she stayed at Monmouth and coached,
Mhm.
and I went to the G League, and then after that, it's like we would see each other in the summer, and she still was down in Virginia, and I was in outside of Philadelphia, and we would see each other, and we were still dating and stuff, and it's just you didn't see him enough. You would never
Right.
lived with them, and then I went to Australia, and she came with me, and it was like paradise. Everything was perfect. It was, you're making a
Mhm.
lot of money, you're in paradise, there is no problems, there's no everything, food, everything is taken care of, you have a
Mhm.
car, like it was paradise, and you didn't have to worry about anything. And then you kind of come home, and then I go away again, and she doesn't come with me, and then I'm like back, and then I'm away again, she doesn't come with me, and I'm back, and it's like she started a job and she was home, and it's like we weren't together ever. So then when
Mhm.
I eventually retired and came home, it's like you see the things that you never saw, even though we got married and
Mhm.
we're living this dream life. It's like we weren't together. And then when
Right.
you're kind of like realize some of the things that you're like, okay, this personality, this is like, it's not meshing like you thought it was.
Right.
And I think that was the biggest thing that I encountered is I was gone. And then I came home, and it's like we weren't meshing. It wasn't connecting like, you know, it should
Right.
have. But
Right.
you don't know it because you're away, because you're living a completely different life. And like I wasn't a wild child. Like I just kind of, went over there, did my thing, and stayed. I like wasn't doing much. I was just kind of chilling, and then came home, and it was like, all right, this thinking it was going to be happily ever after. So I
Right.
think that's where my situation, like you had talked about before, I think that's a common thing in overseas when you come home and it's like not at all like you thought it was going to be, because you never spent, I mean, college basketball, it's just like everyone's running all over the place professionally. It's like you never got time to really have that connection. And then
Yeah.
when you do, it's, you're 12 years into a relationship, and you're like, wow, I didn't, we never really connected like I thought we did.
Right. Yeah. It's tough,
It's,
man. It's
yeah,
it's really tough, especially for those of you that go back home. You leave your woman there, and you go back home, and things just, yeah, just sometimes it just doesn't work. You kind of like live kind of two separate lives almost.
yeah. So you then go into another relationship. Take us through. So how did that end up in that same situation?
Oh, well, first, before I go to the second marriage, I have to give a word of caution. Um, in Europe, it's different than back home, whereas you can pretty much go to the courthouse or wherever, and you're divorced in 3 days, kind of
Yeah.
like that. Here's different over here. So you get divorced over here, you're talking about usually anywhere in Europe or most places in Europe, you have to be separated for 1 full year before you can get the divorce.
Okay.
We had separated. I was in Germany at the time. I had just gotten to Germany, and she was supposed to come with our son. She was living in Austria where we had our apartment, and she was due to come over in a couple of weeks, and we had been fighting, and it was over
Hmm.
basically. And we were in like training camp, so that's why she didn't come early because I was away at training camp. So we were beefing, and we decided to split in while I was in training camp. And then eventually after training camp, I flew back, and we talked everything out and everything. It wasn't like a hostile thing. And of course there were some emotions. It wasn't pretty, but it wasn't like throwing frying pans kind of thing.
Hmm.
It wasn't bad. Then we worked out some financial details, and me at that time, I was making pretty good money, and I knew we had to be apart for a year, and because we had an apartment that we had bought, and but we were going to rent it out while she was in Germany. That was the plan. We
Hmm.
already had somebody to rent it, so basically she was homeless. Not cool. The timing of
No.
it was terrible. Not cool.
Yeah.
So basically, then I had to put up for her to get an apartment, everything. So for the first, I think 6 months of that season, I was giving her 80% of my check.
Wow.
I
Holy
was making
shit.
really good money, and I was giving her 80 because, of course, she had to get an apartment, she had to get another car, she had to furnish the apartment, she had to take care of our son. There were things that she needed to do, and me, I am not a money person at all. If anybody knows me, they know I don't care about money at all. So my whole thing at that time was, as long as she and my son are happy, I can live off the rest of my money.
Yeah.
That's not a big deal. So for the first 6 months, that's how it went. And actually, things went for a divorced couple. Okay, we talked everything, um, and things at first were pretty okay. They didn't really change until that year was over. So I played that whole year in that season in Germany. Then I went back to Austria because that was our base anyway. So I went back to Austria, and the date for the divorce was in June,
Hmm.
and we were cool by then. Um, all the animosity seemed to be gone. I made a really huge mistake by not getting lawyered up. So that is my thing of caution to all athletes. Period. Yes, love him. Yeah, great. You got kids. You want to do the right thing. Yes, but definitely get lawyered up. So my situation was that my ex-wife, she is a money person. She's very business oriented. She has her own
Hmm.
place, her own business and stuff. So she knows how to deal with money. She went to a lawyer. Our talk was, okay, we're going to go to the courthouse, we're going to go to the judge, we're going to do everything together. We kind of talked about the ramifications of financial stuff. We're going to do this together, and we don't need lawyers. Yeah. Right. She was to a lawyer, I wasn't. She had shit prepared, I didn't. We walk into that courthouse, and I get hit with totally different stuff than we had talked about before. And because me, yeah, I'm making good money. I, as long as they're okay. And I agreed to some really, it was so bad what I agreed to. The judge like took a timeout, and he was like, Mr. McCaw, do you really want to do this? And it was a long story of what I agreed to, but basically I was screwed for 10 years.
Wow.
And no matter how much money I made,
Yeah.
that was the big thing. I was locked in on a certain amount of money for 10 years, no matter how much money I made. If I made 100 million, it would be the same. If
Yeah.
I made $32, it would still be the same.
Oh, that's crazy.
So the judge even was like, Mr. McCall, are you sure you want to do this? And me like, oh, it's gonna be okay. I'm making good money. I have no problem. I'm good. You
Yeah.
know? Yeah. Shit.
That's
My
yeah.
next contract was less than what I had made that year before. I thugged it out that first year with the payments and everything. But after that, it was like, okay, I can't do this no more. Like
Yeah.
this is ridiculous, and like I have like nothing to live. It's terrible. And yeah, and then we went to court again because I wanted to lower it, but it was so crazy. So to make a long story short, and I'm being really open here, I can't believe I'm
No,
telling you
like
this.
no, it's
Um, to make a long story short, I was so screwed that years later, I had to go into a bankruptcy, a private bankruptcy because of my divorce because I wasn't able to keep up those payments. Then I had retired. I
Yeah.
wasn't making the same money I was coaching. I wasn't making nearly as much money. So it wasn't working. So that's my word of caution. Please go to a lawyer. You want to do right by your wife. You want to do right by your children. That's all well and good, but take care of yourself because nobody else is going to do it.
No, you said it. You hit it really well. I mean, and like I appreciate the honesty and the openness. It's a really tough situation, especially because the one thing that when you were speaking on this, you do as a father, you're like, I'm going to do whatever my kid needs. Like, I'm going to make sure that they are completely set up. I'm going to be there for them. I'm going to make sure that, they never have to worry or things aren't always bad. I will put them above me any day of the week. And that's the boat that I became in is, like that was the biggest thing is I was like, my biggest concern is my child. Like this didn't work out, but my child is the most important thing. So what am I going to do to make sure, financially everything that they are taken care of? Because it was huge. And those are the things, those are the pitfalls. If you don't have that lawyer, if you don't have that situation set, people always blindside. I feel like overseas basketball contracts, we're dealing with like we are constantly getting blindsided by shit.
Yeah.
So having that, blindside on top of the other blindsides that you've probably dealt with in basketball, that's really tough and hard to overcome. But it's great to see you're still standing, you're still fighting, you're still going because that shit's tough. And that's a good warning to people out there who are looking into the situation because obviously we have overseas basketball players have issues with maintaining relationships.
Right. And just the last kicker to my story, when you do a bankruptcy here in Europe, it's not like back home. You're locked in for 6 to 7 years where you literally anything you make above a certain amount, they take.
Wow.
And this 6 to 7 years, depending on the amount, right? So that really handcuffed me for a long time. It handcuffed me really until I'm on my third marriage now. Until it went through my second marriage and into my current marriage at the beginning.
Wow.
It was really really tough. It was really really tough. So definitely, if you're planning on staying in Europe, get lawyered up, but also back home. I mean, it's clear.
100%. Yeah, you had to get a good lawyer, someone who's going to fight for you. And I think too, dad rights are becoming more of a thing. Back in back in the day when my parents got divorced, it was like people didn't really. It was like the mom has the say, and now I think we have the
much more.
Exactly, we much more power to kind of say like no, we're good. Like we can raise this child. We can do these things. So now you go into your second marriage.
Yes.
Was that something where you like, you know what, the second time is going to be better. It's going to be good.
I
love the pause is the best part.
I'm trying to hide. People might see this later, so I'm trying to be diplomatic about
I understand.
it.
Yeah, 100%.
I can definitely say I had a brain fart that whole second relationship.
Okay.
From the beginning until the end, it was one of those situations where she was definitely not my type of woman.
Mm-hmm.
From how she looked. Yes, beautiful woman, but everything around her was not the type of woman I would have normally find myself attracted to.
Yeah.
There was other things that I just didn't like. There were some things but I was like blinded and totally like a brain fart that whole relationship. So this is a short story because I ended up going to play in Geneva towards the end of my career, and I was there for 2 years. And we met before actually I decided to go to Geneva. When we met, she was living in Zurich, and we hit it off. But I don't know. I don't know what I seriously, Kevin, I really, to this day, I really don't know what kind of voodoo she had on me, but
Uh-huh.
I was totally not myself. And yeah, and we got together. I decided to the team in Geneva offered me, so I said, okay, I'd be close to my girlfriend, blah blah blah. And we got together, and it was crazy, and we ended up getting married. I didn't. We definitely didn't talk about getting married,
Yeah.
and I did it on a whim, like on New Year's, totally drunk, um, in the club.
Uh-huh.
I can remember the song that was playing. I got down on my knee. It was like, what's the name of the song? Want to Get Married by 112 or something like that. It
Oh
was
yeah,
some,
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah.
and
I
we're gonna get
remember that.
married. That was
Yeah.
playing in the club on New Year's. I get down on my knee, drunk as I don't know what, and ask her to marry me out of the blue. Never talked about it. We had been
No
together
ring,
already.
anything? Do you have a
I
ring?
didn't even have a ring, man. I didn't. It was drunk. I was in the club, man. It was New Year's, man.
Yeah.
And 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 I asked her, and she said yes, and yeah, and then I was like, oh God, okay.
That
She
was
said yes.
happening. Yeah.
Okay, and yeah, and then yeah, it's crazy. We were together, I think, maybe a year and a half before I asked her, and then we ended up, I don't know, half a year later, we get married in cliche in Vegas
Hmm.
at the
Okay.
Excalibur Hotel.
Nice, nice.
I am
Good
from
choice.
Vegas. I am from Vegas, so that was just a bad omen. That was just a really bad omen. And and yeah, we get married. Everything, you try to do the right thing and stuff, but she just wasn't. She just wasn't. It just didn't work. It just didn't
Yeah.
work. We were literally together. We got married in December. Then she came to Germany. She was pregnant with our child, so I have
Hmm.
two children from each marriage, or a child from each marriage.
Hmm.
She was pregnant. She had our daughter in February, and by then, yeah, she left in February. She left. I think in February before our daughter was born, because she had our daughter in Switzerland. We had a big blow up, and that was it. And
Wow.
it was just madness. It was just really madness. And so then, of course, we have to wait 1 year
Yeah.
to divorce. I'm playing in Germany at that time. She moves back to Switzerland. Um, there was some crazy things that went on with our daughter. I actually had my daughter for a while. I went and picked my daughter, drove to Switzerland, picked my daughter up, drove back to Germany by myself, and had my daughter for some weeks. It was
Wow.
really it was really not healthy. It was really crazy.
Yeah.
I go to a lawyer to try to get full custody, and they're like, "Yeah, it's not going to happen, Mr. McCall. If she calls you and says she wants the kid, you're going to have to bring the kid back." A couple weeks later, that's exactly what happened.
Damn.
So we were literally married not even a year before we got divorced. So we were together. We weren't even really together while we were waiting for the year, but we were married. But I don't even know how many months we were, 3, 4 months before we split.
Wow.
And then the next summer, after my season was over, I went out to Zurich, and we did the paperwork for the divorce. It was not very amicable. It was very uncomfortable. It was not cool. I mean,
Yeah.
a divorce for anybody is not cool.
Yeah.
I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. It's terrible. And yeah, and that was pretty much it. Like it was like quick.
That's
And
crazy.
yeah, and I was definitely better prepared the
Yeah.
second time around. Um, but the thing was is we didn't have very much. With my first marriage, we had stuff. We had the apartment we had bought. We had a car. We had stuff. With the second one, we weren't even married long enough to have anything. I mean,
Yeah.
in between the seasons when I was playing in Geneva, I was living with her in Zurich, and so it wasn't as if we had a whole bunch of stuff, and so it was kind of cut and dry. It wasn't that bad actually from the law side of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was it. It was a wrap.
Wow. That is wild. I always think, and I try, like right as we're talking, I'm trying to figure out in my head my situation, I'm listening to your story, and I'm like trying to calculate and figure out like, okay, what is the issue? And I definitely with that, like I see some things because I feel like when you get done too, like when you play basketball, you want the glitz and glam. You want
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
and you're a competitor too. So you're like, I want to be the best player. I want to have the nicest stuff. I want to have the hottest wife. Like you are constantly
Yeah.
competing and you end up competing against yourself because then you're almost like, all right, like even this might not be right for me. I'm gonna go because holy shit, look at
Hmm.
her.
Yeah.
And I can walk around with her and people would be like, yep, that works.
On candy.
That checks
Hmm.
out. Yep, that checks out good. And I think that's something too that we get ourselves because how many relationships with of guys who are athletes start with just being like, okay, who's the hottest girl here?
Hmm.
Like I'm gonna find the hottest girl. I don't care if they're right
Hmm.
for me. I see it all the time. Like this is the hottest girl here. I'm gonna pick her and she's gonna come with me and we're gonna be get married and stuff. And like you don't really have that personality. And I also
Yeah.
think too, like there's situations when the hotter the girl, like the more trouble it can be in terms of like it's trouble. Like you're kind of
More money, more problems.
exactly you're looking at and you're just like, okay, everyone in the everyone's chasing this girl and everyone's writing her, and you're like, all right, well, now I'm not playing anymore. Is this something that you're really, like, are you getting text messages on the side because I'm not playing anymore, or this guy's not playing anymore? So that's a thought process. Like when I'm trying to think about this, I'm trying to calculate and be like, that's definitely a big thing. Like
Oh yeah.
we're always chasing shiny,
Oh yeah.
and when we chase shiny, it's not always going to work. Like some guys work, some
Yeah.
guys chase
Yeah.
shiny, and
Yeah.
it's just I do think that's something that we have as an issue with being an athlete, especially overseas. Like you have the distance, you have that lack of closeness, and then suddenly, I mean, you're kind of thrown into this situation. It's wild. I think there's so many. I'm just trying to think of like if you were writing an online dating profile about an overseas athlete, like how would you juice it up to make sure that we don't get immediately rejected and they're like, no, fuck this guy. Like that guy's not for me because he's an overseas athlete. Like we have this stigma, and I feel like those are the reasons
There's a
why.
lot to it. There's a lot
Yeah,
to that. There's definitely a lot to it.
100%. And how do we I don't know how it's going to be normal. And on top of that too, like I'm talking about them. What about us? Like we we're the same thing. Like when we're playing, I know there's crazy amounts of shit that happens. Like it
Mhm.
doesn't matter what you look like. If you play professional basketball, like someone's going to be chasing you. Like you're getting
Right,
chased.
right,
And I think that's
right.
such a wild thing too, is you are just going to be constantly
Bombarded.
bombarded. And how do you handle that? Like I think about even myself. Like I was a skinny kid, in high school, like kind of dorky and stuff. I was good at basketball, so people liked me, but I wasn't like getting girls like that. And same like college, like it wasn't like that. And then you kind of get in the
Mm,
pros, and you're like, all right, shit, like you're starting to grow into yourself. You're starting to
mm,
look a certain way, and now like suddenly it's people are chasing you, and you're like, what? It's so new that I think that's where the allure comes in. You're just like, all right, shit, this is a great situation. This is new. This is
mm.
great. I can really do something here because I've never had this happen before. And now, that's how you get yourself into trouble because you're just then you get into that cycle. That's a
Yeah.
dangerous cycle. It's real
I mean,
dangerous.
for me, I as an athlete, I have to be honest and say I never had a problem with women. I never had a problem getting women. Never. I
I
mean,
did.
I was rather spoiled from high school on. Like there was no problem for me. I don't think I'm the greatest looking guy in the world, but I think I got something, and
Yeah,
of
you
course,
got that. You did. Yep.
if you're an athlete, it's easier to come in contact with women. I'm tall,
Yeah.
so it's a thing where I'm in a bar and the girl says, "Oh, you're tall," and then you just get into a conversation like that where maybe the normal guy working in a computer shop he goes into that same bar, nobody's saying anything to him, you know?
Yep.
So that's the thing that a lot of athletes have to deal with, that whole thing of you're used to it. You're used to getting chicks. You're used to going out and having a good time. I mean, in between my marriages and before my marriage, I was just out there, man. I was living my life. I was living my
Yeah.
best life. I got to say. Um, and you just got to get used to it, you know.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until after my then second failed marriage that I was like, dude, you are doing way too much. You need to refocus what you are looking for in a woman, and because that ain't it. Like you
Yeah.
are no, you're no, it's not no, no. So yeah, and that's the thing is you get older as well. When
Hmm.
I'm married now for the third time. My
Yeah.
wife is wonderful. We're together 13 years. Um, when I met her, I was coaching. I wasn't an athlete anymore.
Yeah.
And shout out to MySpace. MySpace
Old school. Old school.
hooked us up, right?
That's how we
So
did it back then. Yeah, that is
yeah.
how we did it back then.
So yeah, and it was just one of those things where it was something that I needed, and she was there at that right time. And we're in 13 years now. She's got, she, I mean, I have two stepchildren that I don't actually say are my stepchildren. They're my kids. I'm with
Yep.
them since they're little, and then we have one child together. We're a patchwork family at its finest, and we make it work. And she's together with me now through. She was together with me when I was damn broke because of my bankruptcy.
Hmm.
After I came out of that, you know, then I was coaching and everything was good. And now uh, we've got a great house. I mean, it's pretty dope, you know. But for a long time, I was lost, man. I was
Yeah.
lost. And being an athlete, you kind of go through that as well, like when you lose your identity
Yeah.
as well. And that makes it hard on a relationship as well for the man, you know, losing his identity as a player and then going to be a family man all of a sudden. You know,
Yeah.
it's tough for that as well.
I think the identity is a huge component of why these relationships kind of, I know even my relationship, before I was divorced, I didn't know who I was. And I think when I came home, that's where I struggled the most. Is I was like, okay, you're used to this certain level of celebrity and now it's gone like
Mm-hmm.
that. You're used to a certain level of financial, money
Mm-hmm.
just rolling in, that's gone. And now you're kind of like mentally just trying to figure out what your next step is. Like, what are you good at? Because I was
Right.
good at playing basketball. Now, what am I good at? Like, I'm not good at other things, and that's like the mental thing that I think athletes deal with is trying to figure out what that next step is, what what their next part of their identity is going to be. And
Right.
I think, like you had said, the relationship I'm in now, Joanna, she didn't never knew me as a basketball player,
Yeah.
so she was just knew me as just a human being, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where you have this it's not she's not chasing just because I was a basketball player. It's like
Right.
she looked at me as a human being and loved that human being. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
why I think, that those later relationships after you're done are like the most successful because you have exactly what and you don't care about all the other stuff. And it's like to the point where I'm like, hey, check out this. This is what I did. Look at this highlight. And she's like, I don't give a shit. And I'm like, oh. Like, well, I want you to care a little bit, something. Feeling
Yeah,
it
I
right
know the
there.
feeling. Yeah. No, I think my mom told me two things when I was growing up that I yeah, that I totally didn't do. Um, and I probably should have listened to her. The first thing she always told me from I can remember from the time I was little, she always told me, don't get married till you're 30.
Yep. It's a good
Because
call.
then you know exactly who you are, and more importantly, you know what you don't want.
Mm-hmm.
I did not listen to the first time I was married. I was older than 30, the second one, but I was just a dumbass. And but but yeah, that was one thing that I look back on and say, hey, when I was 30, when I was kind of coming into my own, you
Yep.
know, I was coming into my own, and I knew a lot of what I wanted and didn't want. The other thing she told me, um, this is hilarious. The other thing she told me was you get married the first time for love and the second time for money.
Good
Damn
call.
sure didn't follow that one either.
Flip
um,
them.
but I don't believe in that. But I just thought it was. I think she was half joking when she told me that. Um, because I mean, she was together with my dad forever,
Yeah.
so she didn't get to marry. She married for love. But I guess if she would have divorced my dad, then she would have married for money. I assume. Um, yeah, so it was that I definitely didn't follow either one of those things, and yeah, I mean, I really think she was just joking with the married for money.
I think the what you said about the 30, like you should, it's such good advice because really that is when you figure out your identity. And as an athlete, it's like times that by
Yeah,
3,000
yeah,
because I always say, being a professional athlete, it's like my friends used to say, like, hey, Peter, call me Peter Pan. They're like, hey, Peter Pan, like, when are you coming home? Everything was Peter Pan, like Peter Pan this, because they're like, you're just in Neverland, living this crazy life, like never growing up. And it's like, it's true.
yeah, yeah. It is.
It's hard to grow up when you're doing something where like you're being treated, it's a game that you're playing and you're getting all these accolades. So when
Mhm.
you really do kind of like when I reached that like 30, 31, 32, when I started retired and stuff, and I was like, who am I? Like, what do I want to
Mhm.
be? It really did change a lot. And it was a mental struggle at times, but I feel like I figured out who I am now. Like I
Mhm.
legitimately I used to draw tattoos on my arm, like as a kid, like a crazy person. I wanted, but I didn't know about them. When I went to New Zealand, I learned a lot about, what tattoos represent, and
Right.
everything that's on my body is obviously extremely important to me. But when I was in my old marriage, like that was not something that I would ever do. I would like was a different person. I felt like I didn't
Mhm.
have my identity. I took on her identity. I was like very okay. I have to be this way. I have to
Yeah,
dress this way and stuff, and
yeah.
not and I was not me. And that was
Right.
the biggest thing is once I kind of figured out what my identity is and like said, you know what, this is not who you are. Like you're this person, and you're trying to be this like you know conservative pie
Mhm.
every day. Like, and I'm like, that's not me. Like, that's not
Yeah.
who I am. I'm like a person who's like compassionate. I'm emotional. I care about things, but I'm also like, I want to be who I am. And I felt like it was freeing when I could actually become who I was or who
Totally
I
understand.
am and like get rid of that other guy who really was not me. It just
Yeah.
wasn't me. It was just someone who was just trying to, you know, hang on to this and be the certain person where now I had money, so I had to act like this. And
Right.
I'm
I
glad that
totally,
person's dead.
totally identify with that. Totally.
It's you really do have to find your identity, and I think that's the biggest thing when what the whole entire conversation about divorce is once you figure out who you are, and it takes time, and it takes relationships failing, and it takes struggles financially, and it takes you know mental struggles figuring out all those different things, but I think when you really figure it out, you're just going to live a happier life. I always say, like, what did you, I'm 42 years old. I retired probably like 10 years ago. I'm hoping, I have like 40 more years of just, you know, 50 more years of fun and, living this life and enjoying it. Hopefully, in that time, they're just like giving you a new heart and knees and everything. So, I hope I have that all that time. And I'm like, this is really the longest stretch of my life. And, what am I going to do? And how do you identify yourself? So yeah, it's really important that as a young player, you kind of you have to challenge yourself to start thinking. And I know all the guys you're working with, so these are things they really have to know. It's like someone to be like, listen, I love your tough love. It's great. Like, listen, shut the fuck up and listen to me because you don't know. I've been there. I've been
Yeah.
here, all over the place. So that's why when talking to you is just so nice because you really do get a sense of the travels and tribulations that we've gone through,
Yeah.
and that's created this advice that's created this person who can really help you out and and be an expert in that field.
Yeah. That's what I try to do anyway.
Yeah. Well, you're doing a great job, Sean. And the last thing I think is the toughest one is the children. Like
Yeah.
that became the hardest thing for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah,
is like thinking like
by far.
yeah, I still think like nights when I don't have my child, because I live legitimately 5 minutes away from my ex-wife. So we're very, in the same area. I like legitimately will lay it up at night thinking like, I hope she's okay. I hope this is, and it's like something that will be with me for a long period of time. And that's something that I deal with often, of like what my daughter is going through. How is she going to be? How is she with all of this? And I feel like that became my biggest thing, of trying to make sure that everything is as smooth for her as possible. And that was the hardest part for me, was my child. It wasn't the relationship that I felt like I was a different person in. It was the child that I love so much, who, had nothing to do with any of this, and
Yeah.
is now kind of like suffering with it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was even. I mean, you're living 5 minutes away from your daughter. I'm living hours away. I'm living in different country. I mean, I've got. I'm like Colors of Benetton around here. I got my son. My son is in Austria. My daughter is in Switzerland, and I'm here with my three children here in Germany. Right, so it's not a hop, skip, and a jump away, and that's the really tough part. And yeah, there's been really rocky times because of that with my children. I don't have the relationship with my children that are in Switzerland and in Austria that I wish I would have, due to the fact of me being gone, and I have a lot
Mm-hmm.
of guilt. I have a lot of guilt because of that, and it's not an easy thing to deal with. Yeah, and the kids get older, and you hope um, that they understand things a little bit better as they get older.
Yeah,
Um, and of course, I'm not the one to talk bad about their mother. That would backfire like crazy. And
exactly.
uh, you know, it, yeah, it is what it is. We just didn't work, and but that is not has nothing to do with the children. Unfortunately, in my position, how I was, or how I was in with my ex-wives, sometimes women can use children as a weapon. They
Yeah,
can use children
100%.
to get back to you. And I was definitely in that position, and that's part of the reason why I made mistakes as well. There's no doubt about it. But definitely, women have a lot more say, especially when you're not living there. So things can get pretty toxic.
Yeah,
And I had that, and I've dealt with it. I made my bed, I lay in it. And like I said before, I don't have the my son was 5 when we split, and he really struggled with it because he
yeah,
knew his father, and I was still playing, so I wasn't living in Austria. I was
yeah,
then in where did I go? England. Then I was in Switzerland. Then I was back in Germany. So we didn't have that bond of something like that. And that was really tough for him. It was really
yeah,
tough, and definitely influenced our relationship, our later relationship. He's 24 now, and we go through it. Like, we have
yeah,
issues,
yeah,
and I get it. I wasn't there. We're not going to have. I've kind of made, I don't want to say peace, but kind of that we're not going to have the relationship that I would have hoped we would have. Um, but that has also come with a lot of years of strife and trouble, and just, yeah, just life in general. And you get to a point where I am now, is I've lost that sense of guilt. Some
yeah,
things have happened, and I've lost that sense of guilt. And it is what it is. You just hope that as your children get older, they want to know more from their dad. They want to be around it. They want to know their roots. They want to, and that's been really super, super tough.
yeah,
And it sometimes, just that's just the way it is. And I'm definitely, I love my children to death, all of them. And I sometimes it just goes like that when you get divorced. And like I said, you're right across the street from yours.
yeah,
I'm hours and hours away from mine,
yeah,
and it's just not always easy.
yeah. No, the guilt is a huge thing, and
Huge, huge.
it does. It eats away at you. And I think, your ability to find peace is so important. It's just to try to find that peace, to be like, okay, it's not my fault. It's not. This is all not my fault. Like, this is
Exactly,
not. This is two people made this decision. It's not
exactly.
me. And when you kind of come to grips with that, and you start feeling it's going to make you, feel like a new person. You're I always thought of it like I was in jail. Like I was just, even after the relationship ended, I felt like I was in jail. Like I was doing something wrong, or I was not free to do what I wanted to. But like I was just like I was living my identity. I couldn't just be open with like a new relationship or be open with,
Yeah.
who I
Yeah.
was, because
Walking
you were
on
so
pins and needles.
exactly. And I spent a lot of my life, doing that, where I was just walking this tight line of just being like, okay, I can't do this. And, having that freedom now to just be like, this is who I am, this is what I am, and, deal with it or not. If our relationship's going to take a hit, that's fine. But
Exactly.
this is
Exactly.
I'm not gonna go through life, feeling guilty my
Mhm.
entire life. It's just not
Yeah.
healthy. It's not worth
No.
it.
Yeah.
So, Sean, this is an amazing discussion. We said we were going to go for like 20, 30 minutes. We went for like almost an hour. But I think it's like an important discussion. And I think it's something that no one talks about. And
No. No.
we both, we've done a lot together, and, we're close and we're friends. And it's great because we've been able to kind of open up and share something that really could be valuable to,
Yes.
a lot of guys, a lot of girls, because we talked about the guy side. The girl side, has the same issue. So I think this is a very important conversation. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate your honesty, and, it was tremendous. So thank you, Sean.
No problem at any time.
So this has been the Overseas Famous podcast with Sean McCaw, talking a little bit about relationships and being an overseas athlete. Guys, we will see you next time. Or sorry, everyone, guys, girls, we will see you next time.